Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're doing very well today. This is going to be a fun one. It's a theory video regarding Lurrus of the Dream Den and how best to utilize her. Should she be a main deck 3 of in BG the Rock, or should she be your companion? We're going to talk about the pros and cons of either approach. We're going to show you some gameplay footage from yours truly to kind of emphasize those pros and cons, and we are going to get into a lot of supporting data, and it's going to be all kinds of fun. So thank you so much to Mr. Steven Mirabito, all-around awesome guy, Discord moderator, long-term Patreon supporter, and a credit to our community. This is his Donation League request donation video, theory video regarding Lurrus. So big shout out to Mirabito. Thank you to all patrons, all viewers as well. And one quick note before we dive into the theory, please do see the pinned comment below, because another patron's donation video is going to be an AMA that I open up to the community and the public as a whole. So if you want to participate in that, you want to ask me a question, see the pinned comment below. With that said, thanks again for watching, and let's talk about Lurrus of the Dream Den. Now, before we dig into which way to play Lurrus, I know that some of my beloved boomer rockers out there will be saying, hey, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. Mirabito's question presupposes that you should be playing Lurrus. What about boomer rock? What about cat-free zone Golgari mid-range? Well, I hate to say it, but I've said it in my recent videos. Playing this archetype, rock needs the cat. It just kinda does, if you want to be optimal. Now, I think the gap is not insurmountable. I think the gap is not enormous, but there are relatively few reasons to play Boomer Rock over either version of Lurrus Rock, and none of them outweigh the strengths of the Lurrus and Mishra's Bauble package right now. Not even particularly close, at least to me. But just for full due of Boomer Rock, we'll go over that. Basically, the main reason is to play Collector Roof. If Collector Roof is a top-tier S-Class hate card in the current meta, you can't run it alongside the Lurrus and Bauble package without severe non-bow potential. So if you really need to pack a lot of Collector Roofs, if this guy's going to get you over the line a lot of the time, then Boomer Rock might be a better shell overall than Lurrus Rock. But right now, I think Collector Roof is fine. If you're playing Boomer Rock, I think probably a 1-of is correct. You don't really need this card though, right? It's not necessary. So Collector Roof, a big draw to the non-cat archetype, probably not what we need right now. And then beyond that, you're looking at some other very respectable, very solid, dear to my heart Boomer Rock cards. Tracker, QB, Lily the Last Hope. We know and love these cards, but if you are on main deck Lurrus, and you're playing, therefore, Liliana of the Veil is probably at least a 3-of, you maybe have room for one of these cards. You have a room for a single Last Hope, a single Tracker, a single QB, maybe also another in the sideboard if you want to dedicate the slot to like an only grindy card, but that is kind of a luxury in and of itself. And then if you're playing Companion Lurrus, you can't have any of these, unless you're looking for a transformational plan, which we should not be. We should be picking a lane and staying in it. And although all these cards have their pros and cons that you're looking at here, I don't think any of them are as powerful in a vacuum as Lurrus, and it's not just me who thinks that way. One of the data pools that we're looking at is every rock list that has been published in the year 2021 to answer the Lurrus question, and all 14 of them have played Lurrus in some capacity, so it's Cat Rock 14, Boomer Rock 0 in the year 2021, just to really emphasize that point. Alright, so on to the Lurrus question, my friends, and we are going to look first at Lurrus main deck variants. As I said in the intro, we are talking about 3-of because every single player does that, basically. If you're playing Lurrus main deck, she is a 3-of, and of the 14 lists that have been published in 2021 for the Rock, 11 of them, 11, so a very strong majority, have done exactly that. 3 times Lurrus main deck, so this is the overwhelming favorite. We are looking at Sol Malka's list. Sol Malka, a very legendary, dedicated, iconic rock player, and Sol is also somebody, it's worth noting, just to really hammer home the anti-boomer rock message, that Sol 6 sticks by his pet cards through thick and thin. You're looking at a couple of them here: Golgari Charm, Duress, Ghost Quarter. These are cards that the average rock player is not usually playing, right? Nevertheless, Sol, despite being somebody who sticks by pet cards, has adopted Lurrus with open arms, just to really, really drive that point home. But let's talk about what exactly the main deck Lurrus approach does for us. Well, the most important point, if you get one takeaway from this segment, it should be this. Mana value 3, or CMC3 permanents equal card quality. We've got 3 Liliana of the Veil in the main deck. We've also got a ton of sideboard cards. Plague Engineer, Kalidas, Ashiok, Fulminator Mage, they're all 2-ofs. That is where the card quality of Rock really is. The card quality of Rock is also at the 1 and 2 drop slots, don't get me wrong. But the 3 Lurrus main deck build already have those slots almost, but maybe not fully maxed out. If you want the most broad across-the-board card quality and the most unique hate pieces for your sideboard without running into Nanbo with your companion, you've got to do it this way. You've got to play Lurrus in the main deck, and Lurrus herself as a 3-of in the main deck. Again, this is a higher card quality than other top-end cards in a vacuum, right, that the Rock has access to. So that, in and of itself, in addition to what else it allows you to play, makes for a very high card quality across the board. Another important point to note here is the structure of the list is a classic mid-range structure in terms of the mana curve, in terms of actually playing high-costed permanents, because those are what really reward you for trading 1-for-1 on turns 1 and 2. Then you slam a permanent that the opponent either cannot hate out or hates out the opponent, or is an X-for-1 that has potential to completely snowball the game. That is the ethos of Rock. And let's pretend for a moment, thought experiment, either way, you can pretend that Lurrus doesn't exist at all, or you can pretend that Lurrus exists and you can do whatever you want. There's no CMC restriction with Companion. If either of those were true, you would be playing some of these 3-drop cards, like Liliana, Fulminator, Ashiok, Plagueman. These are definitely cards that you would be playing. So the structure of a main deck Lurrus Rock list, unlike that of a companion Lurrus Rock list, is more true to what we would be doing if we had fewer restrictions, and also to what a classical mid-range deck looks like. So that's definitely a pro if you ask me. Now, let's take a look at a main deck Lurrus Rock list in action. Alright, my friends, so just to prove some of those points, we're going to look at a little footage from one of my old leagues when I was playing main deck Lurrus Rock. This was, while Uro was legal, we were against a Teamer Uro Delver deck, and it's game 3. So both players stumbling a little bit. They've spun their wheels a tad. We've disrupted their land base a lot with a couple Fields of Ruin. We've also missed a couple land drops. We've successfully done a little bit of discarding. We also got our second discard spell, Veil of Summered. So it's been a bit back and forth. Both players down at 11. They've slung a lightning bolt or two upstairs. We may be connected with a Tarmogoyf or something like that, but we do have a relatively even game. Both players with 4 cards in hand, and neither player curving out perfectly. Now is the time when main deck Lurrus can really shine, especially because we've just drawn the second one, so now we are very happy to try to stick the first one. And there are 2 very important lessons in this play right here. Number 1, having multiple copies means that you can afford sometimes to trade the first one 1-for-1, and you can definitely, most of the time, afford to trade it 2-for-1, which is what we're about to do here. Even if they remove it afterwards, we're going to buy back an Isle Spellbomb. That is a nice 2-for-1. The second lesson here is that this, like last turn, we were fielding, we were thought seizing, things like this. We haven't really had the time at all to spend 3 mana, take a turn off to put a companion into hand. So the tempo is really, really important here of just having access to Lurrus as a card that you can naturally draw. Play just like any other card, so I've got it going on double speed here. We're going to watch how this game plays out. See exactly how good Lurrus is for us, but OP having to fetch and shock a little bit more because we have disrupted their land base. They're going to flash in Brazen Borrower, a very good beater, but another upside, of course, of the cat is that it does have lifelink if it connects, which it won't. We knew about that. Lightning Bolt, they're holding up Aether Gust, and we're on the ropes against a Brazen Borrower. So back to us. We have another Lurrus. Do we want to try that? Well, I figured let's get rid of this thing first. I'm going to lead on the trophy because I expect them to Aether Gust it. Turns out they have a mana leak too. That's even better. Either way, we don't want them to get the basic land if we can at all help it. So Decay will resolve. Trophy will trade 1-for-1. Ultimately, that is fine. And again, we've got Lurrus waiting to break the symmetry after our first Lurrus already did. So we'll lead on Inquisition. Opponent will bolt us in response. Very nice way to protect the Lurrus that way. We also... not that they could have done much about it there anyway, but another benefit of main deck Lurrus as opposed to Companion is they don't have any hand information right now. They don't know that our last card is Lurrus, so they're going to bolt us in response, then allow us to take away the Ether Gust. But then, when the dust is settled, here comes the cat. And obviously this is pretty darn good. So we could do a couple different things right now, but there's actually no bauble to buy back that we found yet, so I'm just going to crack the Spell Bomb without drawing, clear out their entire graveyard, then buy it back. So still some nice value there. And the opponent has to rip an answer to Lurrus right away, or they need to kill us. And admittedly, flipping another bolt would have killed us there by flipping Delver and by being able to bolt upstairs. But Tarmogoyf, not going to flip the Delver. That said, we are still kind of needing to really find something. Our deck not necessarily being the most kind to us right now, and now it is up to Lurrus to really go on the dig. So we begin with a little bit of Bauble action. Bauble definitely an okay find, but it can be slow. Right now is one of those times. So after doing a little digging, a little looking, we do kind of need to buy back a Tarmogoyf just to stay alive. Once again, living in fear of that bolt. We could have attacked with Lurrus and just gotten eaten by Goyf, but I'm trying to fade exactly bolt. We've already beaten 2 or 3 of them, right? We've already gotten through those. But the point is, even throwing the Lurrus away in a bad attack is still actually a live line there, just because lifelink is something that can save you in certain situations. But we put faith in fading the bolt. I guess we knew about that because we bobbled them, saw another Goyf on top, right? And we also put faith in our deck. And look at this, we draw Lily of the Veil and Choke. And here's another way in which Lurrus shines, because Lurrus is the only reason we're seeing all of these cards. And we've got a rare situation where we actually drew 2 powerful but clunky spells. So is there a tension between doing something with Lurrus and playing both of these spells? No, because Lurrus plus Mishra's Bauble is a really OP synergy. So we edict them, we choke them out, we're drawing cards, we're absolutely burying them. As always, still kind of needing to just fade that 1 or 2 bolts left in the deck, but assuming we can do that, the value is completely off the chain. And even if we were to get got by bolt, right, there's no shade against Lurrus with that. But opponent didn't have it. So, Blooming Marsh, free discard fodder. We're going to loop Nile Spellbomb here again. We saw Uro off the top with our Bauble. Now we're going to go ahead and Spellbomb Uro away before it can be escaped. They don't have another green yet, and they don't have enough in the graveyard yet, but there's still no reason not to take care of that right away as far as I can tell. And we draw Assassin's Trophy, which is really all we've been trying to find this whole time. Now we get to take care of the Goyf. Now we get to send our own Goyf in, and our Lurrus in, forcing the chump block from their Delver, who sadly has remained unflipped. Even if the Delver had flipped earlier, as long as it wasn't Bolt that flipped it, you know, the attack for them is still a little risky, because we can just gain the life back with Lurrus swinging back, right? All else being equal, obviously, Tarmogoyf does change that. But anyway, the chump block has been forced, our life total is nice and high. Opponent's probably about dead here, but they're going to dig a little bit with Serum Vision, see what else they can see, and, well, they're going to play it out. So here we go. Let's take up with Liliana, try to get anything that's left out of their hand. Ether Gust. Okay, so Goyf goes back on top, and we are still playing, but really we have it wrapped up. We're just getting to flex that little bit more with Lurrus now, aren't we? Feels pretty good. So let's just keep looping the Spellbomb, keep clearing their graveyard out, and we put Goyf on top with that Ether Gust just for closing power, so we get to draw the Goyf right away that way, redeploy it, put the opponent overwhelmingly dead on board, and choked out, and with that, that's the match. So again, the lessons there, the takeaways there, are that main deck Lurrus was really, really important there. It allowed us the tempo to not have to take a turn off to put our card into hand that we really need. We just drew it naturally, and that was really impactful in this type of situation. Having multiple copies of Lurrus was awesome, because they dealt with one after it got a 2-for-1, and then they couldn't deal with the second one, who got about a 6 or 7-for-1 probably when it was all said and done. And number 3, the lack of hand information that they were privy to, thanks again to us not having a companion. They didn't know exactly what was in our hand. In some situations, that could have caused them to play right into our hands. Well, that was some nice stuff, my friends, but what about the other way to play Lurrus in the Rock? What about companion mode? Well, to that, We will turn to Jabberwocky, aka Logan Nettles, another very legendary mid-range player who had a nice 6-2 challenge finish recently, playing Cat Rock with Lurrus as the companion. So, we know what the strengths of the main deck Lurrus configuration are. What are the strengths of the companion setup? Well, the companion rule itself, let's start there, it's still totally busted. As long as your companion is strong enough to see play, Lurrus obviously is. I'll say it again, guys. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Companion is a free 8th card, and especially when that free 8th card draws you the 9th, the 10th, the 11th card, it's complete insanity. Totally busted, very, very strong. But beyond that, Companion also gives you tactical flexibility. It can come at the cost of tempo, and that can matter. We covered that last section, but you can also kind of time walk your opponents. Let's say you're against a control deck, you know they've got Cryptic Command held up, they know you've got a spell you want to resolve, it's turn 4 or so, maybe they're on the play, it's your turn 4. You just put Lurrus into hand to play a tap land and say go. That is a time walk, basically. Now, maybe they can do something on the end step anyway, but if they can't, or if you price them into like a suboptimal Cryptic to bounce your land and draw a card or something, that is a win. And if they do nothing, it's an even bigger win, right? Lurrus absolutely allowing you that tactical flexibility. You can also, if you are flush with things to do, you don't need Lurrus clunking up your hand. This is better against opposing discard spells some of the time. You can trade resources aggressively enough that you can bring Lurrus into your hand only when the dust has settled. Or, if you don't have as much to do early on, you can just, do I play this 1-drop and not really have anything to sink into it, like maybe it's Hexdrinker with 2 available mana? Or do I just put Lurrus into hand on turn 3, and then on turn 4, you can play Hexdrinker and immediately level it up to 3? You see that the tactical flexibility that Companion gives you, it's very, very important. Also, there is no legendary rule we will run afoul of because there is only one copy of Lurrus. She is your companion. No legendary rule issues there. There are other upsides to Companion as well. By definition, your curve will be lower in order to comply with Lurrus's restriction. Therefore, Dark Confidant gets better. Dark Confidant is better on average, all else being equal, with Lurrus as the companion. You have a lower curve, you're going to take less pain off of Bob, pretty simple stuff, and that might also open up the ability to play some cards that we see Logan playing here. We have a one of Night's Whisper, we have a full 4 Thoughtseize. Now, whatever you think about those decisions in and of themselves, they are enabled to some degree by a less painful Bob as a result of Lurrus as the companion. Another very important point here in favor of companion is that you have less variance in either direction. You have less variance with flooding and less variance with Mana Screw. Let me explain. So if you only draw 2 lands, God forbid you only draw 2 lands for about 5 turns, we've all been there. Well, if you're on Cat Rock, main deck Lurrus build, you're going to have some 3-drops rotting in hand. It's just how your deck is configured. It's just how it's going to be. Maybe not being able to play those 3-drops means you can't cast any spells at all. Or maybe it means you're casting less optimal spells, ones that you can't fully leverage, the game slips away from you there. When your whole deck is low curve, when your whole deck except maybe some non-creature spells like Maelstrom Pulse cost 1 or 2, you can operate. It might not be optimal, but you can operate and you can stay in the game until you draw that 3rd land. Or maybe you just only need 2 to win and you're just so full of gas it just keeps coming, you're able to eventually get over the line. You also have less variance with Mana Screw, simply because if you're flooded, you've got that free 8th card to put into your hand. I meant to say flood instead of screw. If you're flooded, you got that free 8th card to put into hand. That in and of itself goes a long way. Lurrus herself can also help fix flood by buying back baubles, peeking at the top of your deck, shuffling away excess lands to the bottom with your fetch lands. You know how all that goes. But we have less variance, again, with flood and with screw. That's very, very important. It is also, we mentioned Maelstrom Pulse, easier to include Maelstrom Pulse in a deck like this. If you have a list like Souls, you have 3 to 4 Liliana main deck and 3 Lurrus main deck. That is your top end. Maybe if you don't have the 4th Liliana, you've got room for 1, maximum 2 more 3-drops or 4-drops, right? 1 to 2, and anything beyond that, you're really starting to tip the scales with too high of a top end. That means it's really hard to play the card Maelstrom Pulse. And if there are ever any other instants or sorceries at the CMC that become really good for us, it's going to be hard to play those too. However, when you are on Companion, you can more easily include these, and in fact, you probably should include a Pulse or 2 when you're on Companion, just so you have those higher curve, high impact, high ceiling spells to reach for that do not non-bow with your companion. I will also say that other cards can thrive alongside the companion shell. It's probably slightly better of a shell for stuff like Engineered Explosives and Nile Spellbomb, because you know that you can reach for the card that enables you to loop these when you need to, right? Doesn't mean it will always work. Doesn't mean you can't naturally draw Lurrus in the main deck configuration and also loop these. We saw that last time with the last section of footage, but it does mean that these are probably just a shade better, although they're great in either shell, it must be said. I would also say that the mana sinks of the archetype, like Hex Drinker, like Scavenging Ooze, they also probably shine more in Companion, because it feels less punishing to get them blown out, classic removal in response to your third activation of Hex Drinker, when you know that you can pull Companion into your hand when you need to start rebuilding. And also, just because your curve is so much lower, you are more likely to be able to cast a spell and then also sink mana into a threat. And this is exactly how Rock, Nickels, and Dimes our opponents to death. Now, there are some downgrades as well. We just listed a ton of upsides, though. You've got to admit that the companion structure has a ton of upsides, but the big downsides are, of course, the mirror image of the upsides of main deck Lurrus. That is, card quality is lower here. It is. You have to play more copies of 1-for-1 removal. And again, Companion kind of rewards that gameplay, but you don't have as many X-for-1s. You don't have as many bombs. You don't have as many unbeatable hate cards. You cannot really replace unique effects like that of Ashiok. And if you're trying to replace the effect of Fulminator Mage, you've got to play a second string card like Logan did here with Rain of Tears. And also the quality of the traditional Rock or mid-range structure, for better and for worse, is kind of shrunk here. It's kind of downgraded. So if they are answering your things and you're flooding and they answer your companion, you've got worse top decking power in a companion list because your stuff is all lower curve by definition. So those are the downsides. But like I said, the more I started thinking about this, the more I started saying, geez, the companion list has a ton of upsides and a ton to like. And with that in mind, let's take a look at a little footage featuring Lurrus as a companion. And now, my friends, for a little Lurrus companion footage from another one of my older leagues, my only Lurrus companion league that I could find. I hope I didn't miss one, right? This was a really long match, and this is a really long game 3 with a lot of draw go at certain points, basically. So I might skip around a bit. But we are in a situation where Lurrus's companion is actually perfect. Now, if we'd drawn it naturally, it would have been good too here, right? But we have to assume that it would have been in the place of one of these spells, Tarmogoyf for a trophy. We've done a little pushing and inquisitioning. We've done some bobbling, but we are not in a very good spot against this Abs and Yawgmoth deck, and we can't even play out our Goyf. It's just going to die to a fatal push. Opponent, of course, got a little clunk in hand with a couple of reactive cards, a Chord of Calling, a food token on the field, so this is a great time to reach for that companion. We are breaking our symmetry. Here we do pull ahead on card advantage, and this is an example of that tactical flexibility where it's like holding up trophy, especially early game, not that exciting. Playing Goyf into push, pretty bad. Let's just deploy Lurrus instead. And so we're going to get to slam Lurrus, and we're going to get that bobble. Right away, this is a 2 for 0. We are our 8-card starting hand became a 9-card starting hand at the cost of a little tempo. Unlike the previous footage, we could afford the tempo this time. Both players, after the early exchanges, are spinning their wheels a bit. We're also, as this match goes on, going to see a lot of incidental value off of Lurrus. Of course, we are able to control our draw step this way. That's exactly what we do. We decide to fetch away the Dark Confidant that's on top because I'm thinking they cannot answer Lurrus right now as things stand. And they can answer the Bobs with pushes, just like they can with the Goyf. Now, granted, that would be good for us with Lurrus. If they're spending their pushes on our threats, we just get to buy them back. But it is also good to just keep looping Bobble. It's roughly as good, right? And maybe we'll draw discard spells in the interim. Maybe we will also just draw interaction in general, and interaction in general is going to be a little bit safer. I'm not too worried about accruing value. As long as Lurrus goes uncontested, we will. And so far, so good. That's what's going on here. We're just making some kind of techie decisions with Bauble. We're basically deciding exactly who we want to look at. Fielding them is tempting to some degree, right? But of course, we don't want to give them Revolt either. So lots and lots to consider here. We will test the waters with an attack, and against Yawgmoth, the life totals are important, right? It's pretty nice to get ahead on the life, and opponent's just going to go tutor up a bird. This is where we wish we just had, non-trophy removal, right? That'd be fantastic. But Lurrus is definitely putting us ahead on life totals with just connecting once. Way ahead on cards, and even ahead on life, which is important for stopping certain aspects of their combo. We see Urborg is on top after their Chord Shuffle, so we're not going to field that away. It's just another thing that does not help them push Lurrus, right? So we're going to play the Goyf, start kind of stressing their mana, because they're going to want to do something now that they've tutored up the bird. Maybe they have another tutor effect in hand. We got to give them push targets, or we're going to, threaten to run away with the game as far as the life totals are concerned, right? So I hope you can see how the tactical flexibility of Lurrus really comes into play here. I'm just going to skip ahead because this is a really long one. Lurrus still uncontested, drawing 1,000,000 cards. It's turn 6 now, and we do kind of have the luxury. We are flooding, of course, and that is always very bad against a deck like this when you're on Rock. It's something we can't really avoid, but thank goodness for Lurrus allowing us to see, again, this many cards. We have a Hex Drinker. They still have a Fatal Push in hand. We are now skipping ahead. They found an Auric Champion. We're going to Thoughtseize away the Fatal Push, and now we get to deploy the Goyf. We know it will stick. Lurrus is probably on about a 10-for-1 at this point. We are now able to field them with impunity, not worried about turning on their push. As far as Revolt is concerned, we also have a couple Assassin's Trophies, and life is pretty darn good. Auric Champion definitely staving off our attacks with Lurrus, though, and therefore the life total still a little bit sketchy, but we can sequence a wide variety of different ways here. We are taking them off of white besides the bird this way, playing it a little safe, holding up trophy, again with the deterministic value of an unchecked Lurrus. We have seen all 4 baubles, by the way, which is kind of funny. You are able to do that, and we're waiting for the perfect time to deploy Hex Drinker. We're just playing it very safe here. And again, it goes on and on. I'll skip forward ahead just a little bit more. We're now going for the Hex Drinker at the opportune time. Note that Lurrus is still uncontested, well into the teens now, probably, with the X-for-1 potential. It's just kind of nutty. And we might, without Lurrus, have to take more aggressive lines here that could or could not pay off. But note that we haven't used our trophies yet. We've got the trophies as a safety valve in the back pocket. And, opponent doing a little bit of work here. They have found Yawgmoth. They have finally managed to kill Lurrus with Yawgmoth, but at the cost of some of their board, at least. And we, in the meantime, have drawn 1,000,000,000 cards. We have found a spot to not only have our Goyf stick, but also make Hex Drinker, Mini Progenitus, and we know how that story generally tends to end. And again, here you could do a lot of different things. We have Surgical, which is kind of cool. We could Surgical away Yawgmoth, because we put one in the graveyard with Go for the Throat. Are we really that scared of Yawgmoth, though? I'm not exactly sure. Why not more Lurrus action, right? So we cast Agadim's Awakening, buy back Lurrus. You thought it was all over. You thought you were safe. And even so, we get to hold up Assassin's Trophy. It's just pretty incredible stuff. So yeah, again, what we're trying to show you here is not only the value and power of Lurrus, the free 8th card turning into the free 9th card, turning into so many more cards than you could possibly imagine. We are all also getting it back with Agadim's Awakening, but that tactical flexibility was huge in those stumbling early turns that made this curve out into something incredible. And now, to make matters worse, the opponent finally dealing with Lurrus a second time Skyclave apparition, but we get to even punish them for that. The ghost of Lurrus comes back as an illusion to eat the Auric champion in combat. You truly do love to see that, and obviously we're very far ahead from here. Again, still a trophy in the back pocket. We draw Fatal Push. We've got another Hex Drinker. We can't really do anything wrong here, right? So let's just clear out their whole board, I guess. But again, does it really matter? Probably not. You could be even safer, extract the Yawgmoth's trophy here, but we are going to be ahead on life total. The opponent looks like they're kind of on the ropes. I think we know about that Blooming Marsh as their last dead card in hand, and therefore that is going to be that, and that's the game. And of course, this was one entirely on the back of with both players having been slowed down due to our interaction early, and to us not naturally curving out perfectly after the interaction with what we drew for our draw steps. The ability to put Lurrus into hand T3 and take over the game as early as T4. That is what won us the game. That is what won us the match. Alright friends, so we've looked at all the data dating back to the new year from published list. I'd like to add my own data, throw that into the ring, but we do have to go back a little further in time just to get a little bit bigger of a sample size. I don't play as much as I would like to, right? So we're going all the way back to June 1st, 2020, which is when Companion was nerfed. So all of the current Companion rules, Rock Leagues, are part of these numbers I'm about to show you. And keep in mind that that Uro and all the other assorted cards were legal for most of this, so it was a pretty darn hostile meta for good old-fashioned Rock, but these are my results nonetheless. With Maindeck Lurrus, 3 of, we are 20 in 10 over 6 leagues. Definitely pretty good, solid results. Nothing to complain about there. Winning 2 for every 1 that we lose. Pretty hard to ask for much more than that over 6 leagues with a fair mid-range deck like the Rock. I have also played 4 Boomer Rock leagues, and I am only 10 in 10. So 20 in 10 with one version, 10 in 10 with the catless version. You hate to see it. Just more evidence, I guess, that Boomer Rock is not the place you want to be. And yeah, I would definitely like to be doing better than 500 with Classic Rock, but that is what it is over the last, 9 months or so. And then we also, I couldn't believe this, but I triple checked to make sure it was true. Unless I'm missing it, I've actually only played 1 league ever with Lurrus as my companion in traditional Rock. Now, I've played Jund Snakespeare with Lurrus as a companion, I've played the Rakdos decks, but I have only actually played 1 Cat Rock deck with a cat as companion, and it was a 5-0, so obviously we need to run that back. Hard to read too much into 1 league, obviously. The main thing that my data serves to drive home here is that Lurrus in either capacity is definitely performing better than a catless Boomer Rock version, but those are my numbers, such as they are, adding to the evidence here. So with all the argumentation and all the numbers laid out, what should we do? What therefore is our conclusion? Well, I will say that no matter which way you want to play Lurrus, I think it is good. I think you basically have to play Lurrus if you want to be optimized, and also I think it is close between Companion and Maindeck, and if you have a strong preference, like if you just really love having that kind of crutch in the form of Companion, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. If you love having that free 8th card to reach for, that's how you like to play, then play that way. If you really love playing a high density of value bombs, of unique hate pieces, of higher costed permanents, then play that way. I think the gap is relatively narrow between the two. If you're better with one and not the other, if you have cards for one or not the other, if you prefer one to the other, follow your heart, because it really is just about neck and neck in terms of viability as far as I can tell. Now, if you want to get a little more analytical with your decision, let's say you have all the cards you need, you have no particular inherent preference, take a look at your local meta, or take a look at the MTGO meta, and take a look at it specifically through the lens of evaluating these 4 cards. I'm going to call these the big 4 of non-companion compatible BGX pillars. We have Liliana of the Veil, obviously a main deck pillar central to our entire ethos and strategy. And then we have 3 very impactful sideboard cards. In the case of Ashiok Dreamrender, it is not only a flexible card, but one whose effect is extremely unique, can't really be replicated, has multiple different upsides. In the case of Fulminator Mage and Plague Engineer, you have kind of best-in-class cards whose effects can be replicated, but with cards that are generally lower quality. We have Reign of Tears, as we mentioned with Jabberwocky's list, that can replace Fulminator, but it's a much worse card. And Plague Engineer, other cards can do similar things in different ways. We have Maelstrom Pulse, we have Engineered Explosives, we have more copies of Spot Removal, but the Plague Man, again, very, very unique. So again, be honest with yourself, be thorough with this, and say, exactly how do I feel about each of these cards relative to alternatives? If you are high on most or all of these cards, you probably want to reach for a main deck Lurrus configuration. If you're thinking that, maybe I'd play these cards, maybe not, I could take or leave most of them, then maybe Companion is a little bit too good to pass up. But don't worry, guys, I'm not going to leave you with follow your heart and it's neck and neck and it's really close. I will make a call here at the very end of the video, and this is a bold call, because again, when I'm recording this, there have been 11 published lists with main deck Lurrus in 2021 and only 3 with Companion. But gun to head, I think I'm going to go for Companion. And take that with a grain of salt, because as I just told you, I've actually only played it once, kind of surprised even myself with that, need to do that again. But I'm thinking that all those upsides we listed, let's just go back over those as part of a summary here. We have absolutely a laundry list of upsides. We've got the free 8th card. We've got tactical flexibility from the Companion mechanic. We've got no legendary rule. We've got a lower curve, which is going to make Bob better. It's going to make Mana Sink shine a little bit more. We've got less variance with both Flood and with Screw. It is also easier to play the card Maelstrom Pulse, and in the future, maybe other CMC3 instants or sorceries that could be really, really good, and might be slightly better as well with the loopable artifacts. Now, there are the other arguments in favor of main deck Lurrus, but I'm thinking right now, if I have to make a bold call, I'm going to say that Companion is the future of Rock, at least for now, and I do think it will wax and wane, right? I do think the relative position of those big 4 cards, as I just mentioned, will be a big impact here, and I also think that you owe it to yourself, if you are a Rock player who's only playing one way or the other, try both. You gotta try both. It's, assuming you have the cards and stuff, just try both. It's definitely a different experience. We've listed all of the strengths and weaknesses that I think are mostly relevant here. And if you're new to Rock, my advice to you is probably to start out with Lurrus as the main deck threat. That will get you used to the structure and configuration of a traditional mid-range deck. If you're new to the archetype, that is probably where I'd start. If you're experienced with only one, play the other. And if you're experienced with both and you really don't know what to do the analytical thing for those 4 cards that I just mentioned. If you still don't know what to do, I'm going to say play Companion. But I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong about that things could change in the future, and that I do need more experience with Companion in this shell to make a more justifiable claim. But that's my call at the end of the day, my friends. Whether or not you disagree with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was fun to look at this stuff. I hope it was useful for you in terms of maybe showing you some things you hadn't thought of or that you didn't know, or giving you tools to do similar analysis of different archetypes in the future. Either way, this was a fun one for me to record. Thank you so much once again to Steven Mirabito for all you do for my community, as well as being an all-around awesome guy and supporter. This video, my friend, was for you. So big shout out again to Mirabito. Thank you to all Patreon supporters, and let me know, my friends, of course, let me know in the comments below how you like to use Lurrus best in the Rock. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.